Today's video, we're gonna talk about negative keyword match types and how they don't work like Google says they work, or what people most think that they work like, if you will, because people think negative keyword match types work like the positive keyword match types. That is, if you add a keyword in broad match, that's basically how it works on adding a negative keyword with broad match, and that's absolutely not the case itself whatsoever, at least on a one-to-one basis. I'm going to explain how each one of these different negative keyword match types work, exact versus phrase versus broad, understand it on a fundamental level, and then with that, how you should actually do your negative keywords, understanding how the match types really actually work at the end of the day. Given that, if you don't understand this, you can never do negative keywords right. So I'll go over all those details in today's video. With that said, if you will, what I have here is it's the traits or features of each one of the negative keyword match types, given that you can never add negative keywords in a sophisticated way to your account unless you understand not only how each one of these work, but use all of them, because they all have their own individual purpose at the end of the day. You shouldn't just be adding, in other words, just broad or just exact, because you're not going to get the most profit out of your ad account that particular way, okay? So I'm going to start with exact match and telling you specifically how that works, and then how you use it to get the full effect out of Google Ads and make the most money out of it. So, and the tool of what exact match negative keywords actually do for you at the end of the day. So with that said, starting with that exact match, these are where the rubber really does meet the road in terms of negative keywords, to where if you want to add a negative keyword to your account and have Google pay attention to it at the maximum level possible, generally speaking, and that is an exact term we're talking about here, the exact match negative keyword is going to be doing it at the greatest level, if you will, because it's literally saying, hey, block this term, not block terms like it, but block this term. That said, okay, you can add a negative keyword in exact match. In Google, what you'll notice is sometimes you'll still show up for that keyword, which is frustrating as hell in terms of trying to optimize an ad account and get the most results out of it. But if you add that same negative keyword in broad match, it won't block it out as well as what an exact match typically will. That won't apply in every market and every company, but generally speaking, if you want the highest chance of Google actually paying attention to what you're telling it by your negative keywords, exact match negative keyword versus a phrase or a broad, okay? Now, at the same time, by the way, adding a negative keyword in multiple match types will increase the likelihood of Google actually paying attention to it. And I'm going to talk a bit more about that later as I get into the broad match negative keywords and what their usefulness is to your business. But just know that just because you add a term in exact match, it won't absolutely automatically block it. And which is why you need to use smart bidding. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But beyond that, okay, the other thing to know about exact match negative keywords is they can be the best for surgical shaping of your ROI, okay, with a technique that I call single word weed out negative keyword strategy. So specifically and I don't hear anybody else talking about this. This is something that I've specifically came up with myself and coined. That is, if you want to add negative keywords, the typical way that people typically do this is they look through their search terms report and then they see stuff that's doesn't make any sense. So if they're targeting roofing services, they find people searching for roofing grants and they'll add that as a negative keyword. Now that's fine in a nutshell. I mean, you got to still know the specifics behind that to do that right, as per what I'm sharing on this video here as a whole. But, okay, you have to understand that there's a lot more nuance to this stuff if you want to make the maximum amount of money out of Google Ads while using negative keywords. And that is, sometimes a negative keyword is not just inherently bad or not bad. It's somewhere in the middle. Advertising as a whole, the money's in the gray, ultimately, because you can find, underpriced attention, certain keywords, certain audiences, certain places you can run an ad that doesn't convert very well. But if you paid low enough amount for the clicks, it would be profitable after all your expenses at the end of the day. And it's extra sales you get that you wouldn't have got otherwise if you were just being completely obtuse about it and just saying, nope, no traffic from that keyword at all. That's it. And then you end up with a third of the amount of money you can make in your market versus the full amount, given that you understood the gray and you just priced different places to get traffic, what they're actually worth, if you will. So when it comes to negative keywords now, you look at the search terms report and you identify micro and macro level trends in that data. So as you add negative keywords, you can block the obvious stuff. Yeah, stuff that you know you want nothing a part of whatsoever. There are stuff in the middle. So such as, how do you know if somebody typing in cheap roofing services is profitable or not? Given that you're not a company that specializes in low price roofing, but you're also not a company that sells that you're on like the upper quadrant in terms of pricing in your localized market. So how do you know should you actually show up for cheap or not? Well, the main way that you do that is you are going to filter your search terms report by anything that is in the search terms report that has the word cheap in it, okay? Then cumulatively, you set the date range to all time, and you see how well every search term that has had cheap in it has converted in terms of the actual cost per lead, and then ideally cost per sale and ROI if you do tracking like I tell you about all the time to do on this channel, specifically because it's going to allow you to identify what negative keywords you want to add and which ones you don't. And you compare that to the account as a whole but more so than that, this is also why you want to know your numbers going in. You want to know how much revenue you need for every dollar of ad spend where you're profitable after expenses. You go ahead and filter all your search terms down to everything that has the word cheap in it somewhere in the phrase. Then you see, okay, I need a 5-to-1 ratio of sales to ad spend. Everything with the word cheap in it produces a 3.5 return on ad spend. So therefore, I'm going to add cheap as a negative keyword to my account. Not only on a broad match level, like I'm going to talk about here with the overarching strategy you should use, but specifically, I'm going to add every search term that has cheap in it as a negative keyword in exact match to block out everything, surgically cut out the part of the traffic that is not getting me the return I want. And, for that matter, that's an extreme example because if I'm getting a 5-to-1 return on my sales already and everything with cheap in it only gets a 3.5, I'm probably going to let that ride because through the further optimization of this campaign and smart bidding and Google weeding out, let's say, certain times of the day or days of the week that don't work, that kind of thing, they could bring that 3.5 to 1 up to a 5 easily still at the end of the day. And then, therefore, I'm not going to cut out a really profitable chunk of traffic I could get from then on because I was too quick to make judgments in the beginning. However, what I do is I actually go ahead and I'll say, if I need a 5-to-1 ratio of sales to ad spend from our keyword traffic, I'll go ahead and I'll task a virtual assistant to go and find every single word variation of term in our search terms report that produces below a 1 ROAS or return on investment number. So less than $1 in sales for every dollar in ad spend spent. And then with that, they'll come back with a list and they'll say, okay, these words somewhere within the search term, that when they're used in the search term somewhere, cumulatively, likely return or actual return from the search is less likely to produce less than a 1 ratio of sales to ad spend. And then in that case, I'll say, okay, great. I manually review it. The ones that are obvious, ones that should be taken out, I'll say, okay, add all negative keywords with these single words within it, and then our ROI will come up as a result, if you will. Then what's left, of course, Google's going to be able to help scale what's left better because they're not going to be so hamstringed in having that inefficiency. And then they'll find out, okay, weekends really did work because we're not, our keywords are inherently just more profitable than they were otherwise. And we're going to open weekends back up, whereas weekends, we couldn't run it before with all the searches that were unprofitable mixed in with everything else. If that makes sense. So, because for that matter, I asked the virtual assistant to come out with all the single words that if they're in a search phrase somewhere that does not produce a good return, I'll look through it. And for a roofing company, I might find something with the word new in there actually shows a poor return. But really, that actually shows a poor return because maybe it was just an anomaly and I'm going to give it a little bit more chance. For that matter, when I have that virtual assistant come out with that list, I will actually say, okay, a single word that's under a 1 return on investment, but also has had over 1,000 clicks since we started advertising, that's the one that goes on the list. So if we haven't had 1,000 clicks from this single word that's within the search term somewhere, then you don't include it in the list. So that you have statistical significance in your data, which is very important. So 1,000 clicks or more, 1 ROAS or less, put it on the list, look at the list. Okay, boom, now we know what negative keywords to add, which is a way to do negative keywords, which is well beyond what the average person does, which the average person, just to be honest, doesn't add negative keywords. If they do, it's just the obvious ones. Stuff with the word in there, free, or, pictures to add. That's just barely scratching the surface of what you can make in reference with your account and as it comes to negative keywords. So that's the other ace in the hole strategy you have as an advertiser to make a account that's not getting the return you want, or just to make more. I talk about these strategies all the time on this channel, and all of them add up to make a big difference on your account when you start to add them all. And which is why you should, by the way, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I talk about these that I just have discovered over the last 20 years advertising. So if you haven't subscribed to this channel, you absolutely should take a minute to do that right now for yourself. I also got a great blog on my site at guaranteedppc.com/blog. The blog has step-by-step instructions on how to make money using the strategies we use at our firm to guarantee our clients' results. There's screenshots there and everything else to show you physically how these strategies work. So check that out. And if you have any questions about anything I'm covering here, by the way, leave me a comment below. I get back to every single person who leaves me a question or comment on this channel, typically within 24 hours time. So with that said, you got single word weed out, and you add all the phrases in there that contain the single words in there that typically trend to poor return on investment. You add all those terms then as an exact match, negative keyword, and then similar to that, if you have any keywords that have those single words in it, you go ahead and pause those at the same time to really, weed out all the search traffic that are going to have those single words within it somewhere now on. Similar to with exact match, something else to know is there's no guarantee it works without smart bidding. I talked about this a bit ago, but you can literally add a search phrase in exact match and Google will have it show up again despite that. Okay, which is why you want to add it in other match types too, particularly broad match, which I'm going to talk about. With that said, your best cure to having Google actually pay attention to your negative keywords is to use smart bidding. If you're not using it already, maximize conversions or maximize conversion value bidding strategy, for the reasons that Google will naturally know you mean business, that you want a certain conversion at a certain cost. And when you're tracking, leads that are coming in that are qualified and running your ads off of what, qualified lead data, not just any lead, but actual qualified leads. And then you, on top of that, use your smart bidding with it, which is what you'd want to do. And you say, I want to pay no more than $25 per qualified lead. Then Google's not going to just be so apt to just ignore your negative keywords. They're actually going to use that data because they know if they don't use that data, the campaign's just going to run down to 0 impressions because it can't find you any traffic that converts at that cost per qualified lead. And then they are going to get no money from you whatsoever. So they like to run up the amount of spend with you in a situation where you don't have tight guardrails around what you're running. But if you don't, it's like fair game as far as they're concerned. Showing up for search terms that you've already blocked, showing up in locations that you're not specifically targeting but haven't excluded on a negative location level, which is another big one that Google uses to pick people's pocket recently. So that's, negative keywords only work great with smart bidding in terms of their effectiveness in blocking traffic, which is another reason for smart bidding versus manual bidding, which a lot of guys are clinging on to manual bidding still. And there are times where it makes sense itself, but which most of the time people don't want to use smart bidding because they want to control their cost per click, which with portfolio bidding now, you can actually do a maximum cost per click and use smart bidding, by the way, which I don't recommend that. I just recommend smart bidding with an unregulated cost per click, because if Google can get you a sale at an ROI that you want, it doesn't matter if your cost per click's $5,000 a click, it's irrelevant. Cost per click means absolutely nothing. I mean, you want to see it go down, which indicates you have a good ad quality score, but in and itself has no bearing whatsoever on your profits. In terms of actual real bottom line profit how much you're making at the end of the day. So anyway, moving forward here in terms of phrase match now, phrase match negative keywords, what we use them for at our firm, having managed hundreds of accounts, getting this down to a science. First thing they're great for above anything else is for competitor terms. Now there's some markets where you want to target your competitor terms, and on a lot of occasions later on, you want to tackle them. So if you're a HVAC company and you do air conditioning installation, you don't want to target your competitor terms probably, because it's a lot of people calling thinking you're the competitor, because half the people don't read your ad before they click on it, and they don't read your page before they call, and they don't even realize you're not the competitor until 3 minutes into the call. You want to weed that crap out. Eventually, you want to try to do it when you've already gotten every last sale you can. You run that campaign with tracking sales, not leads, and then you do smart bidding to optimize for certain sales on that competitor campaign by itself, and then it'll optimize and find the 1%, 2%, 5% of that competitor traffic that works, and then you've got another traffic stream that makes you more money or brings in a certain amount of revenue and profit for you at the end of the day. That's how you have to handle it. In other markets, particularly e-commerce, competitor traffic, it's profitable. You still want to target it for lead generation. Most 98% of you guys watching this shouldn't do competitor keyword targeting because, again, it's just wrong number based traffic. They think you're the competitor and then they hang up when they're not interested anymore. Of course, like I said, you could target the competitor traffic and then kind of take advantage of the fact that they don't know you're the competitor when they call, and then get some of that business if you know what you're doing. I've got videos about that. For the most of you guys watching this, you should just block them, and you should block the competitor names in phrase match, because if you don't block them in phrase match, you're going to add them forever with an exact match, because there's so many variants of so many competitor names, at least in a generalized niche like plumbing, HVAC, stuff like that, that it'll take you forever to add every variant of every competitor search for everything in exact match only. If you're in a market that has 2 competitors, then I would just run them and add the competitors in exact match. And then with that said, tying everything together, I would run a separate negative keyword list for your competitors, so that later on, if you do a competitor keyword strategy, then you could just exclude that list from your competitor campaign versus having to dig through all the negative keywords and realize I have to put these into a separate list to run a separate campaign just for competitors like I was talking about before, and trying to actually monetize that traffic. Phrase match, great for info terms as well. So people searching for, how do I get a gastric bypass done? What is gastric bypass for me? Stuff like that. When you're a gastric bypass surgery clinic, you could add those in phrase match, and that'll usually cover and get you good coverage, given you can't add every variation of that in exact match. So it's a need itself, but also without adding it in broad match and potentially blocking your keywords, which is why you go in the middle, phrase match. Phrase match is also good for wrong application traffic. So if you sell, t-shirts and you only sell white t-shirts versus yellow, you add the search term yellow t-shirt as a phrase match negative keyword itself. And generally speaking, that'll get you pretty good coverage, if you will, without potentially, blocking traffic that could be profitable in the future if you were to add it in broad match. Sometimes people will type in white and yellow t-shirts. Well, if you have yellow added as a broad match, well, now you're blocking that term. So it's a little bit too broad in that situation. A better example would be like somebody who wants to sell, let's say you sell house paint, okay? You could add and you see somebody's typing in door paint. It's still house paint itself. Your product does apply for that, but you don't typically want to sell to people who are using it for their doors. I mean, you can, it's not ideal, but ideally over time, you want to sell to people who are looking for paint for the whole house, if you will. In that situation, I'm going to try to add door paint as a phrase match negative keyword, understanding that it is borderline. It's not ideally what we're going for, but it's not also what we're going for at the same time. I'm going to do that. I'm going to add it in phrase match versus broad match, because again, like the previous example I gave, sometimes people are going to type in something like, 5-gallon door paint, something like that, where they indicate they want to make a larger order. So that is more so okay. So instead of just fencing it all off altogether, I'll tell Google in general I don't want to target that, even though I don't want there to be any situation where they search a little bit wider, door and wall paint, and have the wall paint stuff blocked because I added door as a broad match negative keyword itself. So hopefully that makes sense. Generally speaking, unless in a situation where you could serve a customer, in other words, but it's not your ideal customer, I'll go more so at that negative keyword in phrase match versus broad, because adding it in broad is going to potentially make and block some of the positive traffic that I want unintentionally, if you will. The main thing, and tying in with that, by the way, it is risky to add phrase match negative keywords because you can get negative keyword conflicts, of which, by the way, you search on a keyword level, you do a keyword diagnosis report is what it's called. You can Google that, and that'll tell you if any of the negative keywords you've added to your campaigns are blocking the keywords altogether. And if you are, then you can decide to take those negative keywords out or just pause the positive keywords that you have, either or. But anytime you add negative keywords, you should run a keyword diagnosis report, or at least any significant amount of negative keywords or ones you're iffy about, to make sure you didn't block any of your keywords. That really helps shore up whether or not you've added too many negative keywords, but it's not perfect. Just know the more negative keywords you add, the more likely you're going to block good traffic versus bad. So you should be on the side of, be conservative versus liberal here. Unless your ROI is really trash and you're about ready to run out of money, then I'm going to be more liberal in adding negative keywords, if you will. Just know adding negative keywords on a phrase match level is risky in terms of blocking your positive keywords, given that the whole purpose of phrase match negative keywords is to, generally speaking, block search terms that are similar to what you do, but just aren't quite the prospect that you're looking for. Whereas with broad match negative keywords, that's specifically to block people that have nothing to do with what you're doing. And because it is so liberal, and that's what it's useless for, whereas the phrase match is somewhere in the middle between exact and phrase, this is in itself has the highest potential to actually give you negative keyword blockages at the end of the day when you are looking at it from an upper level. For that matter, by the way, if this stuff is really tricky, I have said that the main thing that separates the true pros and the people that go on to make millions upon millions of dollars in their business and people who make nothing or very, very little and they're working for Google ultimately for free, it comes down to negative keywords and understanding negative keywords, because anybody can set up smart bidding on an account and probably set up tracking. It takes an intelligent individual to look at a search terms report, each individual search term that's there, and identifying, is this a negative keyword I should add or should I not? Given that when somebody makes a search phrase, there's different people who search that phrase. So if somebody's looking for hot dogs, are they looking for what a hot dog is? Are they looking for what it looks like? Are they looking to buy a hot dog? Are they looking for a dog that's hot? There's a lot of considerations here. So when I'm looking at that, I have to identify what's the statistical probability here of somebody searching for this exact phrase turning into a customer. And you have to do that for each search term. It takes a lot of mental horsepower to do this. And if you add too many, you're going to block out good traffic. And if you add too few, you're not going to make money because you're going to get too much slack in your campaigns. So out of all the stuff that you do, negative keywords is the most time-consuming and mentally exhausting task that there is, and separates out the true winners at the end of the day versus the losers on a lot of different accounts, mainly because it's so difficult to do right. If you want somebody that's going to do it better than anybody else, reach out to me at guaranteeppc.com and I'll hook you up with the best negative keywords and related strategy you can get. And I'll also tell you 20 other ways to make your ads more profitable, because we got all the tricks up our sleeves to be able to do that. And our firm does not charge our clients management fees until we can get them a certain minimum lift in their profitability up front, in excess of the fees that we even charge. If you're interested in that, you can reach out to me and I'll give you a quote and guarantee on what we can guarantee for you in terms of results, revenue, profit, and thereof. Furthermore, we also have ad templates available. Ever since I've worked in hundreds of different niche markets, I realized a lot of guys, they don't want an ad management company to manage their ads, but they do want a shortcut in the results. And of course, we got these videos here on this channel to follow. But if we've already put literal ads, landing pages together for a market, we decided, hey, we should be renting these out, given that if you're in a market that our client's not in, it's all fair game to use it in other markets, and it's basically all the same stuff. So if you are interested in one of those templates that we have in the 100+ different niche markets we have templates available, reach out to me at my firm at guaranteeppc.com. I'll tell you what templates we have, what results we got with those templates, and then with that, you'll know how much you can stand to gain using the template versus trying to figure out all this stuff for yourself that we spent years figuring out ahead of time. If you have a one-off question or a thought or comment or whatever that you want to get across to me specifically, you can also reach out to me at my firm, and I do coaching and consulting calls with individuals who, of course, subscribe and watch this channel as well, of which I go over, not only stuff that they potentially think might work, and I tell them what the probability of it working before they have to waste their time and money on it, as well as if you're just stuck in terms of your revenue growth, I can tell you what the issue is that's bottlenecking you right now, whether it's the website, the pricing strategy, the ad strategy, sales strategy. I'm very, very astute in figuring this stuff out for clients because I've been doing it so long. Reach out to me if you're interested in that. You can reach out at guaranteeppc.com to set up a call. I work with agency owners and individual companies alike. So with that said, in terms of broad match now, going into broad match negative keywords. The reason why you primarily use broad match negative keywords, and this is also, by the way, not just what I do, but most agencies are going to do it the same way. These are great for extra penetration from your exact match terms. So like I was mentioning before, if you add a negative keyword in an exact match, maybe Google pays attention to it, maybe they don't. More so if you are using smart bidding and proper high-level conversion tracking with it. But you'll get extra penetration from that negative keyword you added. So in other words, have it actually be paid attention to by Google if you add a broad match version of that keyword. Given that you can't add the same keyword in broad match, what you can do is if somebody you see types in roofing grants, you can add roofing grants as an exact match negative keyword, but you can also add grants as a broad match negative keyword to get to where roofing grants will be blocked at a higher rate itself, but also it just right away gets rid of most of the other grant-related traffic, even though it doesn't do that very well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you'll likely have to add all the other variants of the grant traffic in exact match, or at least a bunch. Because Google's machine learning algorithm will look at and see, oh, this guy's got 25 terms in here with the word grant in it, added as a negative keyword in exact match format. We should likely not have that person, have this guy show up for any other grant-related stuff in the future. But you'll kick off that process sooner with the combination of exact match and broad match negative keywords, with the broad match version having just a single word in there that you know is the offending part of it, if you will. And the exact match is just there to block that exact version, but also to give you extra mileage with the negative keywords that you're adding and doing, if you will. So you'll typically add the exact match and the broad match at the same time. So when you add a negative keyword, you're basically just questioning whether you should add the exact match or exact match and broad match version of it at the same time, with the broad match typically being a single word. You technically could say the same thing about phrase match negative keywords. So if you're targeting, should I get a gastric bypass surgery? You could technically add the word should as a broad match, even though that's almost something I typically never do. And that's that type of search. That's why we do with phrase match, because it's somewhere in the middle of, we never want it versus we never want it, and this exact version of the keyword we don't want, so we'll only add it in exact match format. If you want somebody to just step into your business and do this all for you, of course, we have agency services here where we do that, and we charge a monthly service fee to build our clients' sales results up. And that's been our bread and butter since we started this over a decade ago here at our agency. I also, though, have been investing in firms where instead of just saying, hey, we'll charge XYZ monthly fee to manage all your ads, we'll do something better for you. You need ad spend. You need somebody to get you the results you're looking for. We'll come in and set up all your ads and give you 50 grand worth of ad spend to run your ads. In exchange, we'll take 2, 3, 4% of your sales growth. And ultimately, that's our cut for doing what we're doing. And, that 50 grand will get our sales going, either more than what you have now or just to get us up and going. And anything we get in terms of an excess and return beyond $3 in sales for every dollar in ad spend, we'll throw that excess back into the ad spend to keep the ad spend growing. And then, so we only need a jump start at the beginning. That's what our ad spend is for. And we'll grow you from where you're at now at $500,000 a year in sales to $5 million, $10 million a year. We'll take 4% of the difference between $500,000 and $5 million or $10 million itself, and that's our cut. And so we become equity partners in your business. and you don't pay anything unless we get you an actual additional profit. Ultimately, we don't work with just any company here to be able to do this, but if you got a fantastic product or service that's way better than anything else out there, but your advertising sucks, we'll give you the best advertising in your market, no questions asked. As long as you're willing to partner with us, we can set it all up for you. So reach out to me at guaranteeppc.com if you're interested in that. Taking on applications for companies to invest in at this time. I also got a brand new group that I opened up recently at Discord. You can find the link in the video description where we got guys who sub to this channel that's in there talking about PPC. You can learn a lot of stuff in there. I've been answering questions there directly. I also have a PPC course in there that I give away for free, just as a way of saying thank you for entering the group. And it takes you from start to finish on how to set up a PPC campaign for any business, the way that we do it to guarantee results at our firm. So you should check that out as well if you're interested in learning a bit more about our strategies. With that said, I'm going to wrap everything up with that. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. If you want to see another video, click here. It is one of my best ones.